the only thing that was available at the time was a part-time job in the pulp mill portion of it. And I took it because I needed a job.
Right.
And I spent, when the high water was and they were making pulp,
Right.
they needed extra work to feed the logs into the grinders and
So you
pull
were.
the pulp off in the rollers. And
So I've seen pictures of stacks of logs higher than a building at the Missisquoi pulp mill that were unloaded off of railroad cars and ready for the milling. That must have been somewhere near the same period of time.
well, what we dealt with was mostly the small 4-foot logs, and
Right.
they would go into the grinders, very quickly and easily and become pulp. But what I recall about that part of the yard, because I was mostly inside, but when you go into the yard, you'd see these conveyors, and these 4-foot logs would go up into a huge pile. So they weren't really stacked; they were just piled.
No, they
Someone
were
up there
piled.
would ended up throwing them down.
Right.
And one of my jobs is to, when it got down there, to load it up on carts that would equal a certain measurement, a cord of wood or something. I'm not sure exactly the dimensions of it, and that's what the workers that did the grinding would be measured by and how they were paid. And if they met a certain amount of carts, they would end up getting bonus if they earned more
Right. Right.
than the allotted amount. So
Incentives. Right.
so there was an incentive for everybody, and so everybody was putting pressure on the guy that was loading the carts.
Yeah, okay. So you stayed there for a while, but you eventually, I mean, and you were a young man at that point in time. You mentioned having gone over to Rouse's Point at some point in time for entertainment, and that would have been the Saxony.
Yes.
So that would have been in the late 60s.
No, early 65, about mid 60s. Yes.
That was the that was the hangout place.
That was a hangout. Well, even before that, when I first got back from the service, we used to go to Abercorn, Quebec. That was another hangout, and Bedford, Quebec. So there was several other.
So this was with friends that
But these
you
would be-
still had hanging around from your high school years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they were still here. They were living here. They had stayed behind. They were working, and you got
Right.
together on certain times. And at one point in time during this period of your life, you met the woman who would become your wife.
Yes.
Yes.
And she was at the Saxony Hotel with a group of her friends. As we did as we ran in packs, sort of.
Uh-huh.
And eventually, yes, we got together and we married.
When did you marry?
I married in 1965.
1965.
Yes.
Okay. And at that point in time, were you still living in Sheldon, or you opted
No,
to go
by that
somewhere
time I was working at IBM in Essex Junction.
else? Okay.
I had went to Essex Junction to the IBM with a couple of friends, John Crapo and John Severance.
Okay.
Now, both of those had jobs. John Crapo worked at the mill, and John Severance, I think, was working at Union Carbide in St. Albans. I didn't have a job, but they, on a whim, said one day, let's go down and put our name in at IBM. And I said, sure, why not? And I was hired from IBM. So for a very short and brief period of time, I tried traveling from Sheldon, from my parents' house, to IBM Essex Junction. It was a long haul, and I was on the night shift.
Yeah.
So it was very rough mornings getting back home
Right.
to get to sleep. So.
Right.
So I eventually moved to Burlington for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. And then after you were married, your wife and you lived in Essex or Burlington?
We lived in an apartment in Burlington, and then we ended up moving to Fairfax. We bought a house in Fairfax. We lived approximately 5 years in Fairfax. By that time, we had 2 kids. And we moved to Essex Town, to a home in Essex Town.
2 kids.
2 kids.
One of them is Bob Jr.,
Well, he's technically Robert II,
Robert II. So where does
but
he live
he is
now?
a junior. He's living in Essex.
He's living in Essex, okay.
He works in Swanton at the moment. But
Okay. And the other child was a boy, girl, or
my daughter,
daughter?
she lives in Essex, which is, and at the moment she's living approximately 4 streets away from us.
Okay, so they've kind of hung around.
They've stayed around there.
Grandchildren?
I have 6 grandchildren. Double checking.
Yeah.
No.
Don't trouble your brain with who
Excuse
they
me,
all are.
5 grandchildren.
5 grandchildren. Okay, so I'm assuming post high school, then service, then a few odd jobs, and then finally IBM, and you probably stayed there until you retired.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so that's a pretty typical of the age frame we're residing in.
Yes.
So I got about 2 or 3 more questions. The first one would be, who was the most memorable Sheldon native that you can recall?
The most memorable. I guess I would have to say Lena Stevenson or Aunt Lena.
Aunt Lena.
But there were a lot of memories of others that were influenced in my young life.
Okay, so Aunt Lena, who I wrote about recently and I knew personally, is quite a person. Tell me about her. You knew her more intimately than I ever did.
Well, she was a member of the church.
Mm-hmm. I would have been the
And
Methodist church.
that was the
Yeah.
Methodist church, and she was a neighbor just down the street.
Mm-hmm. Lived on the
And-
corner. Yeah.
And she's it just sort of was. I don't know, almost another grandmotherly
Yeah.
type of
Everybody's aunt.
everybody's.
And everybody's Uncle Bob.
Right.
Mark, excuse me. Yeah, yeah. And so you visit her house.
I had, and the first time I ever saw a refrigerator that had the condenser on top of the refrigerator, and I thought that was the oddest device because when we first moved to Sheldon, we did not have a refrigerator. We had an ice box,
Right.
and which was over time it was replaced with a refrigerator, but it didn't have the condenser on top. But
Was, let me turn, you see, 42. Well, sometime during that period of time, Lena had the library in her home. Remember that?
that part I don't remember
She would've been-
because the first memory of the library was when it was built, and it was next door to the town's clerk's office when they built the new building.
Was Lena the librarian at that point in time?
No, that was Myra Tillotson.
Myra Tillotson. Yep.
Myra was wife of Willie Tillotson. We called him Willie Tillotson. You know, that may not have been a proper way to address.
Was that the brother
In those
of
days.
Burton?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they lived just several houses up the street.
Mm-hmm.
And Willie had the strawberry fields
Yes,
down
he
in
did.
back of our house down in the river. And I recall picking strawberries down there, but I think probably not more than one day of just picking strawberries.
That was enough of that.
That was enough.
Yeah, there was. I've talked to people who actually made money picking for Willie Tillotson and his strawberry fields.
Right.
Which is there's nothing like that there at all. It's all pretty much grown up.
Right.
Of all of the events that occurred in your life during the point in time when you lived in Sheldon, this would have been your childhood and youth. What was the most significant thing you can remember?
I don't. It's a difficult from significant because I did a lot of things that kids are that age probably did and wasn't a significant thing, but to me, a lot of things were significant. You know, the ability to just be free and wander as a child, to let your child today do what I did, you'd probably be arrested for it.
I grew up at the
And-
same time.
And it's I can recall crawling in the sluiceway for the old dam down by the bridge on the river. I mentioned earlier the stone foundation, the stone wall. I can remember when Von Waite built his automotive garage, which was new. That was new. I can remember when the Masonic Hall took over the grain store. To me, it was all kind of significant.
I've often, I actually wrote about it, but I often have told my grandchildren that I grew up in a completely different age where we were free to do almost any exploration that crossed our mind that wasn't too dangerous.
Right.
And some of them that were a little dangerous.
Right.
So, and the last question I would have for you is, seemingly to you, Sheldon is a significant place. And I get to almost get around to the same answer every time when I ask this question. What is the most significant part of Sheldon to you?
I guess memories. Memories of the town hall, the activities, the attending the first town meeting day. I guess just the lifestyle, the serenity. Just was a good place to grow up.
We could probably sum that up in one word:
Home,
people.
people.
People. So you still can remember people.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that you'd like to add that might be crawling in the back of your brain that you think is important to add?
Oh, I'd just like to, speak out to a lot of friends that I think still live there. I know Sally Severy. I know her sister Susan. Susan was more my age. I know Donna Spalding, Donna Reed. Donna and I were very close
Right.
and growing up. She was a good person, very good. We kidded each other an awful lot. Bertie Spalding. I don't, not having been in touch or kept in touch with them, it kind of eats at you when you get older.
I might get around to some of those people as as time goes by. It's really hard to tell. You mentioned Mercure, so you knew them.
I did run into Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Jim and I used to play toss and catch
Uh-huh.
as in grade school age. He went to separate high schools. He went to St. Albans, I think it was St. Mary's. Yes, in St. Albans. And I went to BFA. So, and then, of course, I went to the service right out of high school, so I didn't get much.
Well, what is interesting to me as a foreign flatlander who didn't grow up in Sheldon is that at least half of the population of Sheldon residents are people who have roots in Sheldon. So a lot of the Sheldon population is offspring of people you knew.
I'm sure it is.
I'm
yes.
sure it is. That's kind of what makes it what it is. Okay, well, I'm going to thank you very much for your time, and we will end this discussion at this point as far as video.
Okay, very good.